10 sometimes seems like an interlude in this story. We have all of this action that's been happening in parts 1 through 3 with books 1 through 9 that has to do with the murder of Fyodor Pavlovich. Instead, we have book 10 comes, and who is Kolya Krasotkin? And who are these boys, and why are we talking about Ilyusha again? We have to remember what's happening in the narrative. This book is about much larger consequences than just the death of the father. This section is not a digression, it's a reminder about what our theme actually is. When we looked at the opening of book 1, we were introduced to Fyodor and his 3 sons and how ill-fitting of a father he was. And he was contrasted with the simple father of Grigory. He was contrasted with the father, the spiritual father, Father Zosima. So what we see are these rightful models who we're supposed to imitate, those who are actually helping us become more like Christ, who said that he does the will of his Father, versus those like Fyodor, who are buffoons, who do their own will. In some ways, if we look back at what Ivan said in his papers on church and state, everything is permitted. And this has become a theme, everything is permitted. Well, this makes each person the authority if everything is permitted. Or you follow a father, you follow a model. And what begins to become unveiled in this section is that Kolya is looking for a model. And as much as he keeps saying things like everything is permitted, well, where did he get that idea? He got that idea from Ivan and Rakitin. He's been listening to them. And as much as he's trying to make himself his own man, he's actually modeling them. So it's a microcosm. By looking at these schoolboys, we see a microcosm of what's happening in the larger events of the story. If you've ever read Augustine always talks about how, I think it's in book 1 or 2 of Confessions, where children are at play and they are playing these competitive games, and people say, look it down on children like, what are all these games? And he said, but when you get older and you're playing business, it's just a larger version of the same games. And so the smaller games are where we learn the rules. When we are children and the consequences or the stakes are lower, we're learning how to be moral or not moral. We are modeling ourselves on the larger games of the adults. And so these children are showing us that in this story. In another way to look at them, if it's important to be the right kind of father and also important to be the right kind of son who models the right kind of father, then we have in this story these sons like Alyosha learning about how to act towards the next generation, right? This problem is only going to be solved if we understand the story to be not just about the sole characters and the hero's journey, but the effect that the hero has on those beneath him, and the ways he has towards treating those who are above him. On 552, Alyosha is surprised to hear the way that Kolya talks. He says, who has taught you all of that? And what he understands and what he hears from Kolya's language is that Kolya has been taught by Rakitin and by Ivan. This is 553. Kolya says, if there were no God, he would have to be invented. Of course, that's Feuerbach, but Ivan Karamazov has been saying this. It's possible to love mankind even without believing in God, don't you think? And another thing that Kolya says on 554, I'm not against Christ. He was a very humane person. And if he was living in our time, he would go straight to join the revolutionaries and perhaps play a conspicuous part. And Alyosha exclaims, where did you get all that? What kind of fool have you been dealing with? So Alyosha sees right through this, but these are the big questions of the novel that we're seeing passed on to Kolya, right? Is Christ merely a humane person, a revolutionary among the socialist Christians? Or is he the Jesus who was at Cana of Galilee, right? If there is no God, do you think it would be possible to love other human beings? That, of course, becomes a question throughout the novel.